Hello, welcome to More Yoga with me, Emily. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you are doing well and ready for some stuff. What sort of stuff, you might wonder? Well, a lot of people are requesting low back these days. So usually when I get a request for low back, we release through the hip flexors, we release through the hamstrings, we fire up the glutes, and then we also stretch the low back, or not stretch, but try to release tension in the low back. Um, Another very important component in that is the core, right? The abdominals. Because if you get into this sort of sway back position where the low back gets tightened, right, or lordotic spine, the abs aren't working, right? They're not doing anything. So, a little bit of core, a little bit of those other things. And of course, I always include glutes and core. But yeah, let's do that. And then hopefully your low back will feel better. But we only have half an hour. So, what am I doing talking? Let's jump into it. And by jump into it, I mean lie down on your back. And depending on how your day has been today, you might need some time to get some wiggles out. You might need to take a couple windshield wipers off the legs. Give yourself the time to find a good position on the floor. Your legs could be extended. If your low back is tight these days, then I highly recommend bending your knees, taking them wider than your hips, and letting your knees fall in toward each other like I'm doing right now. This ends up being a really great release for the sacrum and the low back. If you happen to have a little lift or a pillow or a block, then you bring it underneath your sacrum, and then you get even more low back release here. So you might be in a totally different position from me, and that's totally fine, right? You go where you need to go. And then for a few breaths, inhale through your nose and exhale, gentle sigh of your breath away, right? Cleansing breaths. And then continue breathing however feels best for you. Could be in and out through your nose or your mouth or a mixture. But start to notice how your breath is flowing, how it feels here. Maybe there are some sticky or choppy spots in your breath, in which case you could gently try to lengthen through those parts of the breath just to smooth it out a little bit more. Maybe your breath feels really smooth and free today, in which case just acknowledge that for whatever it's worth. A few more breaths here. And then when you feel ready, start to bring a little bit of movement back into your body. Whatever way feels best for you to wake up here. You could take a little windshield wiper over your knees or a big yawning stretch. And if you have something underneath your sacrum, or then gently remove it off to the side. Give your back a moment just to come back into neutral. And then draw your knees in toward your chest and take a little rock from side to side. You might release through the legs a little bit, draw circles with the thigh bones and the hip sockets. You might have your hands on your knees. You might just be moving your legs however feels best for you today. All right, and then come back to center. Hug your knees toward you a little bit and notice as you do that, your low back presses into the floor. And I want you to try and maintain that, right? Low back pressing into the floor as you start to reach your legs up to the sky. Though the knees could be bent, they don't need to be super straight. It doesn't really matter. But keep the press of the low back into the earth. You might even choose to bring your fingertips to your temples, elbows wide, or behind your ears rather, and lift the head up off the earth a little bit. You don't have to do this, but you may. You might even be up in a full crunch. But so the more you crunch up, the easier it is to press the low back into the earth here. And then I want you to start to reach your right leg down. It might not be a lot. It might be all the way down with it barely almost hovering off the earth. And then exhale, come back up. You could bend your knee and do that instead of reaching the leg all the way down. But we're going to do a few of these here. Gently lowering one leg to the earth and exhaling to bring it back up. The whole time, keep pressing your low back into the floor. So what we're doing by pressing the low back into the earth as we work here is really switching on the transversus abdominis, so the deepest core muscles, right? The ones that call it like the corset muscles, right? The deepest core muscles, they hold everything tight. And then you have your rectus abdominis, the ones that run up and down the six pack, as you might know them, although there's more than six bulges there. And then you have the obliques, the ones on either side that are responsible for twisting and stabilizing this side of the body. So a few more of these. Keep pressing the low back into the earth. If you notice it release, then come back, reset. Last one each side. You're probably wondering when I was going to say that. All right. And then release down to the floor. Whew. Little windshield wiper or shake out. And then come back to center. This time we're going to do an exercise where you don't have to lift the head up, because sometimes it generates tension in the neck and it I don't know, it can get a bit gnarly. So take your arms out to the side, and you might have your arms in cactus, or they could be all the way out to the side in a T shape or some variation of those two. And then lift your knees up. Now, the closer the knees are toward you, the easier this will be. The further away they are from you, the more difficult this will be. Every time you come back to center, I want you to press your low back into the floor. So I'm going to start in a Pilates tabletop position with my knees over top my hips, and shins parallel-ish to the earth, hugging the legs toward each other the whole time. Now, that's the most important thing. Using these big adductor muscles helps fire up the deeper core muscles. So you could even bring something between your legs as a reminder to hug the legs toward each other. And then arms out to the side. And on your inhale, bring your knees over to the right, but only so far as you can before this left shoulder blade wants to lift. And then exhale, come back to center. And then inhale over to the left and exhale, center. Again, every time you come back to center, press your low back into the floor. And then keep doing these rotations from side to side. Now, again, you can challenge yourself if you want by extending your legs or even reaching them further away from you. You can make this easier on yourself by bringing your knees in toward you. So now you will definitely feel the obliques, the twisting muscles, starting to do their job. On each side, we have ones that twist in both directions. Internal and external obliques. Last couple rotations here. Keep pressing the low back into the earth as you return to center. and then shake it all out. Little windshield wiper of the legs. And let's give the abs a little bit of a break here. And we'll set up for bridge pose. So feet hip width apart, parallel-ish, close enough into your bum. You can tickle your heels with your fingertips. Now, bridge can be quite a deep extension of the spine, right? A back bend, if you will, which can sometimes trigger your low back tightness. So this is why I want you to be a little bit careful to not really arch into the low back as you lift up. We're going to concentrate on squeezing the bum the whole time, all right? So press your heels into the earth and inhale, come up. See, if I were to not engage my glutes here, I'm getting a really deep lordotic spine here, right? A big arch through the low back. So squeeze the bum to lift the hips. And then you're still getting an extension, but it's protected and you're firing up the glutes. So a few of these, inhaling to lift and exhaling to lower. Now, it doesn't matter how high you lift up, but two things I want you to concentrate on. One, extra squeeze. Give an extra squeeze to your glutes, right? Even if it feels like I don't really need to do that, I can lift up. I want you to give like a little bit of extra squeeze at the top, whatever the top might be for you. And the other one is notice what your thighs are doing. You don't want them winging out to the side. If they are, I guarantee you're not working your glutes as much as you could, right? Working those bum muscles. So the knees aren't going to touch, but your thighs also shouldn't be flaring out of a neutral sort of hip width distance. Last few here. All right, and then when you come back down, pause. You can shake out the legs a little bit if you want to, fix your clothes if you're like me. All right, we're going to do another set. Now, option up and down, the same thing that we did, or next option to walk your feet further away from you and to come up onto your heels. So setting up for a bridge that should target your hamstrings a little bit more. Why would we work the hamstrings when we need to lengthen them? Good question. It's often easier to lengthen or stretch a muscle group if you first fire it up. If you first work it, then your brain knows where to release the tension. So here we go. On your inhale, lift the hips up to the sky and exhale, slowly lower back down. Now your feet don't have to be as far away from you as mine are. They could be further away. If you lift up and think, oh, this is not for me, then come back to your normal bridge. If you don't feel it in your hamstrings, walk your feet further away from you to lift up. Oh, there we go. A couple more. Right, you're working the entire back line of the body here. And the next time you come down, release, shake out your legs a little bit. And then we're going to do one more set of bridge. We've done this one once together before, and it's setting up like you're in a supine butterfly position with the soles of the feet together and the knees wide. This might not be where you want to go, in which case go back to your first bridge or your second bridge. Otherwise, join me. Press the sides of the feet, the baby toe edges of the feet into the floor to lift the hips up. Now, as the hips lift up, try to think of squeezing the bum to press the knees down. And then slowly lower back down. So a couple more of these. Up and down. These target glutes, just a different section of the glutes than the first ones, right? Because your glutes, we've got a lot of them back there. There's gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, gluteus minimus. They all do different things. Plus, there are other muscles there that we would just sort of generally include as part of the gluteal group, even though they don't have that word in their name. Piriformis, TFL. And there's a lot going on back there. Last couple of these. All right, and then shake it all out. Come back to center. We're going to do one last little bit of core work as before we come up, rather. So, first option is to bring your hands underneath your bum. And I probably should have said this on the first section, is that having that little lift is a really great way to keep your low back pressed into the earth without having to work quite so hard for it. So, if you felt like in those first two core exercises that your low back really wanted to lift up off the earth, then bring your hands behind your bum and then bring your knees up. All right. Some of you might stay here. Some of you might bring your hands to the outside edges of your head and crunch up. And this time we're going to reach one leg forward and twist to the opposite knee and then come back to center and then twist. So this time I want you to think of pressing the low back into the earth. If you've got your hands here, you're just doing, not just, but doing the leg portion of the bicycle. Otherwise, join me with the twist. And you don't have to reach your legs all the way down, right? You'll find you are getting the twist, the work. And maybe we speed it up a little bit. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. All right, shake it out a little bit. Or take a little rock from side to side. Maybe you start to rock and roll up and down your spine if that feels good for you. If it doesn't, then roll to one side and press yourself up, but we'll meet on hands and knees. So eventually setting up with knees underneath your hips. Toes can be tucked or untucked. Let's move through cat and cow. It should feel really good after all of that work. Inhale, lift the tailbone, hollow through your lower back, broaden through your collarbones. Exhale, tuck the tailbone under, round through your spine. We're going to press the floor away from you here. Inhale to dip into cow. Exhale, round into cat. So a few more of these undulations. Maybe you add some extra movement here. Could just be a wag of the tail from side to side. If you'd like to get into the low back a little bit more, when you round into cat, send your hips further back toward your heels, and then you'll feel the stretch sort of travel down your spine. Last few breaths here. And then come back to center. All right. I promised you that we would release through the hip flexors and the hamstrings. So I better make good on my promise. If you're going to use a little bit of padding underneath your knee, underneath your left knee, now is a good time to do that. And then on your inhale, step or sweep the right leg forward. There's so much more I would love to do. Like, this could easily be a full hour-long class, just focusing on strengthening and lengthening. But here we are. All right, back out of the hips, hug your legs toward each other, really squeeze your bum on the back leg, belly button to spine, shoulder blades on your back, and then maintain all that as you shift forward. Back toes could be tucked or untucked, right? And then sometimes you might need to change how far back that back knee is, but really squeeze the bum on the back leg. And our bodies are sneaky, right? They think, oh, she's not thinking about squeezing her bum, so I'm going to relax a little bit. Get back into it. Because the more you squeeze the bum on the back leg, the more you're going to open through the hip flexors on the front of that leg. And the more we open through the hip flexors, the quadriceps, the more tension we're going to be able to release through the lower back. You might press your palms away from you to send your torso back even more. Last couple breaths here. All right. On your exhale, shift your hips back as you extend through your front leg for your half splits. Hands could be on hips. If you have a wall, you could use a wall for stability. Right? If hands on hips is super wobbly, bend your knee a little bit more so that you're able to bring your fingertips to the floor to give yourself a little bit more stability. Maybe you have blocks that you bring your hands to. If you have a deeper variation of splits, you're more than welcome to slide out to where you need to go. But then keep wrapping the outer back hip forward. Draw the outer front hip back. And then flare the toes on the front foot. Peel them back toward your face a little bit more. So we're getting into the calf muscles as well as the hamstrings. And you might stay up tall with a long spine. You might round forward. Right? It can change where you feel the stretch. Last few breaths here. I should mention, if kneeling like this is not good for you, you could sit down and do a hamstring stretch from seated instead. Something like this. You could pause the video to give yourself a little bit more time because we're about to switch sides. Or rather go into a different stretch. All right, so rock forward into that front foot again. And then bring both hands inside your front foot. Heel and toe your front foot out wider on an angle so your toes could be off the edge of your mat. And then you might need to shift your back knee back a little bit more as you shift your weight forward. Right? So the hips start to lower here. You might stay up high on your hands. You might come down to your forearms. And if this front knee really wants to wing out to the side, you can keep this front ankle active, roll to the baby toe edge of the foot, and then allow the knee to wing out to the side. Make sure you're not just hanging out here though. There's a little lift, right? A little hug of the legs back to the center line, belly button to spine. Last couple of breaths here. All right, and slowly back out of the hips, and then heel and toe or sweep the right knee underneath you. Little wiggle or shake or cat and cow. And then we'll do all that on the opposite side. So if you're using padding, bring it underneath the right knee, and then step or sweep the left leg forward, coming up to your half kneeling, and then back out of the hips. Get all those activations going again. So the hug of the legs toward each other, really active squeeze of the bum on the back leg, tall posture, and then maintain all that as you start to shift forward. Right, with all these activations going, it's unlikely that you're at sort of the end range of the posture, which is good because look what's happening to my low back here. And it's a fine place to go to once in a while. But if we're trying to release tension in the low back, we don't want to go into that position. So squeeze the bum like crazy on the back leg. Your palms could rest on the front thigh. You might press them forward to get even more extension at the hip. And if the front knee is wobbly, think of driving the front heel into the earth a little bit more. It'll fire up the glutes. Speaking of which, squeeze the bum on the back leg a little bit more. Last few breaths here. And you'll notice the more you squeeze the bum on the back leg, the more you're opening into the front of the hip. All right. On your exhale, shift your hips back as you extend through your front leg for your half splits. Again, hands could be on hips, or maybe you have a wall or blocks, or maybe the earth. If you have a deeper variation, feel free to slide out where you would like to go. And then a little micro bend or even a deep bend on the front knee, but try not to lock it out. That's a really good way to give yourself sciatica. And then wrap the outer right hip forward, outer left hip back. Flare the toes on the front foot, and then peel them back toward you. It's almost going to feel like you're trying to drag your front heel back toward you as you're here. And then again, you might stay up high and tall. You might fold forward. I'm not going to demo that on this side because I've got something going on this side. And I always say, if you're in pain, don't move through pain. So I'm going to try and follow my own advice. Again, if you wish to sit instead, please feel free to sit. Last couple breaths here. And then slowly on your inhale, rock forward again into that front foot. Bring both hands inside your front foot, heel and toe it out wider and on an angle. Again, toes could be off the edge of your mat. And then shift your hips forward without just hanging out here, right? So again, feel that little hug of the legs back to the center line. Maybe you stay up high, maybe you come down low, maybe that front knee wants to wing out to the side, so keep the front ankle active and you can allow it to roll to the baby toe edge of the foot. Last few breaths, wherever you need to be. And then gently back out of your hips. And then either heel and toe or sweep the left knee underneath you. And take a little wiggle or shake or cat and cow. All right. And then shift your hips on one side so you can make your way down onto your back. Maybe you get a sneaky little extra core burner and do a Pilates style roll down to come down to the mat. Maybe you're using your hands or your forearms. Maybe you're already down on the mat. And then once you're down, hug your knees in toward your chest and take a little rock from side to side. And then pause here in the middle. One option is to have one hand to each knee and just stay here in this little ball. Second option is to clasp your hands over top of your shins, coming into a smaller ball. You'll feel a little bit of compression on the front of the hips. If that's okay, then great. Already you might be feeling a bit of release through the lower back. Next option is to gently curl your nose toward your knees. Last option is to press your shins up to the sky, getting real big rounding through the spine. And then slowly lower down to the earth. Let's move into a twist. So right arm out to the side. You might shift your hips right a little bit to start with, and then exhale, lower your knees to the left. So this time it's a really passive twist, right? We're not doing those twists like at the start. You could have a block in between your knees, underneath the bottom one. You could take a single leg twist, cross leg, whatever you need. But a few more breaths here. All right, on your inhale, return to center, reset your pelvis and your spine. Maybe you shift the hips left a little bit, left arm out to the side. And then exhale, lower your knees to the right. And again, as gentle or as deep of a twist as you need. And it doesn't have to be the same variation on this side that you did on the first side. And twisting is a really great way to release tension in the lumbar spine because most of the twist that we get in our spine is through the lumbar spine or the cervical spine, right? The neck. So if anything is sticky, this is a great way to release it. Last couple breaths here. And on your inhale, return to center. Reset your pelvis and your spine. And for your rest, one of my recommendations would be if you have a block or a pillow to bring it underneath your pelvis or your sacrum. So not the low back, but right under the pelvis, and then draw your knees toward you. And then you might stay here. You could stretch your legs up to the sky. But even just having that little bit of lift in the pelvis should mean that the knees come toward you relatively easily, so you don't have to hug them toward you. And this sort of supported snail variation is a really fantastic release for the low back. You might even kind of feel it tick, 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 in a good way as the tension releases. If you don't have anything like that, then that's fine. You might just choose to rest on your back, legs bent or straight. You could rest in child's pose, which is a really great imitation of that snail pose, particularly if you don't have any props. You could rest in a seated meditation. And as always, there's no rush to get there. But once you have found your pose of rest, for 3 breaths, inhale through your nose. Exhale, sigh your breath away. Couple more. With each exhale, let your body melt a little bit deeper into the earth. Let go of your breath control. Let go of any last muscle gripping or tension, particularly in the neck or the jaw. And stay here longer if you can, 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.